All right, last time we left off with a promise that you would remind me to assign part 2 of Unit 3. Part 2 is the big one. I have looked online and a couple of people have suggested that maybe it wasn't worth 20 points, it was worth more. I believe it's now worth 40. So there were 80 some odd check marks, and that might be a little much for a 20-point assignment. So that was a good piece of advice. Let me just make sure I updated it out here. The only thing I changed was the points. Please. I thought I changed it. Maybe I forgot to change the assignment. Let's see what the evaluation sheet says. 40. So I forgot to change the assignment, but I did change it to a 40-point assignment because it requires you to do everything that we've done to this point. You've got a business class that is a good start, and you saw hopefully the challenge of creating a business class without a GUI. I did share with a couple of people that what some people do when they're testing their business class is create a form with one field on it, one text box. And when you then in the validating event for that checkbox, you call the whatever you're testing in the business class. So one text box tests first name. Leave it blank, you get yelled at. Type it in, it's okay, it capitalizes it. Cool, that works. Then you write the property for last name. You change the validating event, so when you leave that text box, it calls or it transfers that text into the last name field, and you can't leave it blank, and it capitalizes it. Cool, that one works. You just keep moving on that way. That can be a good way to test those if you wish, but at this point, it's getting a little beyond that. Unit 2, you'll be taking that business class that you have and expanding it to some extent, but mostly you'll be adding the GUI with the database, add a grid, customize the grid, add the get record events, display record events, validating events, a lot of stuff. Lookup tables, forms, methods, display record, grid, select, change, all the stuff we've done to this point goes into part 2. So when you're done with part 2, you should have what we have here, which is the ability to switch from one record to another. The filtering is also in there. So this should work for your application. What won't work, unless you choose to add it, is dealing with null fields. There are null fields in all of those databases. Most of the ones, those of you who did your own, you may not have any null fields. You won't have to worry about that. But in Unit 3, in order to verify that your null fields are working, you're going to have to add a couple of records with null values in them, so that you can see that those optional values process properly. Those of you using DVD, those of you using car maintenance, I think those are the only ones I saw besides the customized ones. There are some null records in there. When you click on them, you will get database errors. You'll get a report saying there's a database error. That's okay for part 2. If it makes you crazy, you can do what we did right here, which is add an if statement to say if it's null in the database, then give me the empty string. If it's null in the database, then give me null in C#, 2 different nulls. So you can add that, but you don't have to for part 2. That'll be required in part 3. Part 2 also includes a documentation file with all your stuff in. So given that bunch of information, how long do you want? Tomorrow? Gonna make some friends real fast, huh? Again, you kind of have a task list in my notes to follow through with. Kind of. Each program is a little bit different. So I do have it as 40 in the database. The only place I forgot to change it is on the assignment sheets, and I'll do that in my spare time. I'm guessing the end of next week's pushing it.
April 7th.
That's a perfect day then. April 7th is the Tuesday after break. That sounds pretty good to me.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Then as a review, last time we started talking about the differences between null in the database and null in our programs. Null in the database means one thing, and null in the database has a different representation, a different connotation than null in your programming language, any programming language. So what we need is some way to sense that that data in the database is null. Then we have to translate that, depending on how, what we want to do, translate that into null or the empty string in our program. The only place you should have to check for this is in fields that allow null, that are optional. In this case, if you use the customer does not have to order a soda, doesn't need cheese sticks, doesn't have to have a coupon. Those are the only fields in this example that are optional. The descriptions of your DVD car maintenance programs describe what is optional. For those of you who did custom projects, your validation described to me what was optional. So for those fields, you have to check to see if there's a null value in the database. The way you check is you simply add our data row. Remember, I'm in get record here. This is in the class. Remember where we are. I'm in the class. The class is the one that talks to the database. So if there's null values in the database, the only one that should really have to worry about it is the class. So in the get record method that we've written, we go out, we get the record with this ID number, and we stuff it into this pointer called DR that's pointing to all that data that we got from the database. We transferred all the DR fields into the properties in our business class. But for the fields that are optional, we have to first ask if that DR has a null soda, which is basically what that says. Is the soda field in the record that DR is pointing to, is that null? Does it represent the database version of null? If it does not, then go ahead and save it because it's there. But if it does, then we have to figure out how to deal with it. If it's a string, store the empty string. If it's a numeric field, integer, double decimal, and it is null in the database, then use, since we have nullable variables, use null in the program as well. Same thing down here. So the processing, I've given you the two different kinds of processing. What do you do if it's a string? What do you do if it's a number? And that's how you deal with them. But you have to figure out which ones are optional. And your requirements should make that pretty clear. Those of you doing custom projects, I don't think I had any problems. You all had some optional fields. What you need to do is add to your database a record. You might want to need to do this manually using Access. Add to your database a record where those optional fields are actually missing so that you can test these to make sure they work. Questions? The reverse of this will also be true, and we're going to cover, that's what's next in my notes, is how do we save data? Right. So I just was there. Where did that happen? Okay, here we go. How do we save data? When we save, we also have to worry about these nulls because we have a version of null in our business class, but the database doesn't have the same representation, the same concept. I guess the concept's the same. Doesn't have the same representation as null, so we have to do that translation again. So this is kind of a null cycle, if you will. From the program, if we want to, we save null into the database, and from the database, when it comes back in again, we have to convert it from null to either the empty string or null. So again, at this point, you're a little bit beyond what unit or part 2 of unit 3 requires, the assignment. You can view all the records you want. You can change them to your heart's content. I just changed Dolores to a medium pizza with 13 cheese sticks. When I come back, it's gone. The changes have not been saved. If I click the save button, nothing happens. I'm pretty sure there's no code behind the save button right now. So the next thing we want to be able to do is save the data. And one reminder on the form, going back to the code form here, please. Actually, I'm going back to the class. That's where the reminder is. I commented out this method or this property. Many of you did the same thing in your Part 3 assignment. It's perfectly acceptable. So far, I have not found a use for that. So if we're not using it, why am I making the order ID available to the GUI? I don't expect the GUI to display it. I can't change it. The only reason this property would be here is so the GUI can get to it. So far, it hasn't been necessary. We have used this in the constructor. We have used this when we bring the records in. And we will use it again when we save. But we'd never change it. So I'm not sure I need that property. We'll keep that in the back of our minds. All right, back to the GUI. Button save is what we're working on next. I want to save the changes here. And I already have a little bit of code here, but first things first, I'm going to go back to my notes. And go back to that picture and think about what we're talking about here. This picture. I now have a save button. The save button is basically telling the business class, hey, business class, whatever you have in your properties, save it. What we will need is a new SQL command to save our data. We will need some way to get this data back into the data table so that when we save it, this data table is what gets saved to the database. And then nothing really comes out except done, I did it, or errors, heaven forbid. Okay. But how did the new data get into this, get into here? Let's run it again. For this first record, I've turned down all the toppings. How do I get those checkbox values into the business class? Because the business class is keeping the updated versions of these. How do I get those over there? Nobody knows, or everybody's afraid to tell me? Everybody knows. I changed the name. What's in the business class right now? Eve or Volker? Why? Because I have my validation turned on. I left the field. And when I left the field, my new value transferred to the business class. Changed the date to today. Tab. What's in the business class? That date. Not February 14th. That date is now in the business class. What's in the database? The old one. But the business class already has this new information. Every time we change a field, we've already written code. That was part one. We've already written code that says pizza size is now medium. In the business class, we stored medium. It's already there. When we change checkboxes, immediately the new value, checked or unchecked, true or false, is sent to the business class. Change the numeric up immediately, as soon as we leave. All of that data is stored in the business class. So at any given time, the business class reflects what's on the screen, always. Because we wrote it. We wrote all those painful validation events. There's the checkboxes. Any topping, send it to the database. Or not the database, excuse me, the business class. Date picker, I'm leaving, send it to the business class. Combo box, I'm leaving, send it to the business class. Not only send it, but validate it. But anything I change that's valid, here's the RDO, any one of the sizes, send it to the business class. So when we hit the save button, the business class, this stuff, already reflects the changes the user made. The business class got all that in there, not automatically, we wrote the code to transfer it using the validating event. So what we have to do in the business class is say, okay, take all this stuff, put it back in the data table. Is that right? No, I lied. What we're going to do is create an SQL query, and we're going to send all of this stuff to the query. So here's the new data. Put it in the database. But again, there has to be a button on the GUI for the user to say, I'm done, do it. We take all of these things, send them to a table adapter, and update our database. How do we do that? Magic. Nothing is bound. What that means is it doesn't automatically get changed in the database. Only gets changed in the business class initially. When we're leaving those fields on the form, the business class updates. So what we have to do is transfer that stuff from the business class into the database. The way we do that is using an SQL statement. The next question, however, is how do we know which fields changed? Oops, they wanted sausage. Okay, done. I hit save. How do we know which fields in the database changed? How do we know that it was just the sausage that changed? That's the only record, that's the only field that changed. The easy answer is we don't. Whenever the user says save, we take every one of the values and we say go out into that record in the database and update it with all this new stuff. And the only thing that's really different is the sausage. The logic to figure out what's changed and what hasn't and only save the stuff that's changed, that logic is horrendous. It's possible, but it's horrendous. So what we do instead is simply say, just take all the data. I don't know what's changed. Put it all back in the database, and if it hasn't changed, so what? We replace the old value with the new, and they're both the same. Doesn't take any extra time. Doesn't take any extra logic on our part, which is great. We just save everything. When I say save, the SQL command that you have, oh, actually you have seen it, right? In Unit 1, most of you in the SQL class have seen the update command where you did an update where ID number equals 3. You've seen that. That's the SQL command that we need to issue here. We are going to update every single field, regardless of whether it's changed, to make our life as a programmer a little easier. So we need some kind of an update SQL command. We need to add that to the table adapter. So here we go. I'm going to add an update query to the XSD. Remember the XSD is this guy here, and it has all of my queries in it. I'm going to open it up, and you remember this guy. Now, I'm just said we're going to save all of the fields. Since we're saving them all, we can use this table adapter because it's got all the fields in it. This is another reason we save everything. If I saved only what changed, I'd have to have a table adapter for every combination of fields that there is. No way. No way. Every combination. That's really painful. So we're much better off changing everything. But this table adapter currently only has one query in it. The query that gets one record. We need to add a new query to it. To add a new query, you can right-click up here, right-click down here. Doesn't really matter where. And we're going to add a query. This is in my notes. I'm going to add a query. And what are we going to use? SQL, of course. Ooh, update. Cool. There's a button here to create an update command. Awesome. So we don't have to type it, and you don't have to know the SQL for it. Even Zach, who's not even in that class, can handle this. I want an update command. Turns out when we built our table adapter, MySQL already created one of those, but it does a really lousy job, so we're going to build a better one. Next. Whoa. What the heck is all that stuff? Well, I wish I could make it bigger, but this says update the table, change the order date to, what's the question mark mean? What's the question mark? No? Whatever. What am I going to get? When I run this query, I'm going to provide you that information later. That's what the question mark means. Remember we did that when we said, go get me one record. Which record? Where the ID equals question mark. Every time I called that query to get a record, I had to say ID number 13, ID number 172. You have to provide that information. So the question mark here means I'm going to give you an order date, I promise. Change the record with this order date, with this first name, last name, size, pepperoni, sausage, mushroom, onion, green peppers, number of pies, soda, cheese sticks, coupon. Every time we do this insert command, we have to send all that information in. And this is the part that I really love, where the order ID equals and the order date and well, I don't even know what all the rest of this stuff means. I've never looked at it. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to find the and. There it is. And you're going to delete the and in everything that follows. Now when you do that, you get an extra parenthesis left over here. Notice there's two of them on the where clause. Or the extra parenthesis. Now what this says is update TBL orders wherever the order ID equals 17. How many order IDs 17 are there going to be? 1. So what was all the rest of that stuff? Well, the rest of that stuff's just in case there was more than 117. Well, there's not ever going to be more than 117 with us. So we don't have to worry about all that other stuff. So this simplifies, I would hope you would agree, that query significantly. Update every field in the table, in the row, in the record, where the ID number equals whatever number I'm going to give you later. There's our query. So we take the default query that they gave us. I can't undo far enough. And even that won't put it back. I have to start over again. Find the word and, because it's in there. This is in my notes. Find the word and delete everything from the word and to the end of the query, all of it. We don't ever need it. Ever. Take out the extra parenthesis. What you should get is an update every single one of my fields where the ID number of your record, your DVD ID, your car maintenance ID, your tortoise ID, whatever, is equal to question mark. And notice all the question marks. Every single time we call the update command, we have to provide values for every single question mark. It's not as bad as it sounds. Next, what do we want to call this? You could leave it alone. I tend to customize it just a smidge and say this is my update order query. This name, whatever you pick, will appear down here so that you can see it. And if you have to change it because you mistyped something or who knows what, left a field out, hard to do because we're just deleting the junk we don't need. But if you need to edit it or delete it, you can find it by name. Next, can you handle that? One blue check mark. Remember the first time we did queries, we got like 6 or 7 of them. Well, that's because it created different kinds of queries for us. In this case, we only asked for one, an update query. And it gave it to us and it said, yeah, I understand. But it's also kind of hinting to you, it doesn't hint it here, but remember behind the scenes, there's 7, 8, 9 question marks in there. It understands right now, but you have to provide all those question marks. There's my update order, and it says, oh, by the way, you promised, send me all this stuff. I will, and you have to send it in that order. Oh my God. I hope I can remember that. You don't have to. Now remember, when you change this, I recommend to save all. I just resized my box because it got wider to make a little more room for this. Ouch, there's that query again. If you resize it, if you move these around, I recommend to save all. I don't even think about it. Whenever I change my XSD, I do a save all. Done. And more likely than not, it will remember the positioning, the size of these things, and all the queries in them. So if you move them around, they'll stick. So that's step one. In order for us to issue an update command, a save command, we have to have an SQL command to do that in the data class. So I added it. So now this table adapter knows how to update as a query to do that. Now, probably got to get, and here's all this stuff, find the word where, find the word and. I don't know why you're finding two words. Why don't you just find the word and, first one, because there could be lots of them, and delete everything after it. Get rid of any extra parentheses. Note all the question marks. One blue check mark. Done. Now, remember, a three-tier model, right? GUI, business class, data class. The data class is ready. It knows how to update. Now we got to teach the business class how to update. I'm going to add a method to the business class to do this. So I'll go to the business class, collapse everybody. This is another data access method. I am accessing the database. And I have a get record method, and I have an order lookup method. Now I'm going to add a save record method. So this is still public because the GUI, when we click the button, is going to call this method, say, hey, you save record, do your stuff. It doesn't return anything. It just does. It takes whatever's in the class. Remember, we're in the class right now. So this method has access to all of my properties and all of my members. It has that direct access to them. So when it's done saving, it doesn't send anything back. It just kind of hangs up the phone or says, I'm done. That's it. It returns. That's all. Its name is save record. That's the name I always use. That way I can reuse this method or customize this method for different programs in the future. Might as well call yours save record. Many of you are getting pretty good at copying mine, pasting them into yours, and taking 2 hours to try to figure out what to change. But at least you didn't have to type it. Save record, empty parentheses. We don't have to send it anything. It's inside the business class. Again, it has access to all of the members. So I don't have to send the members in. I just have to say, hey, you, Trevor, Mr. Save Record guy, do it. Then he goes off and he does all his expertise that we're going to teach him how to do here in just a second. And when he's done, he said, I'm done, click. That's all we need. A nice Volcker quality description. This method saves the current property values into the database. Updating the existing data, at least for now. In Unit 4, we're going to insert. And that's still a save, right? It's brand new, but it's still a save. And so we'll end up using the same method. We'll have to tweak it a little bit. But for right now, we're just going to get it to update an existing record in the database. All right, Volcker's notes, how do I do that? We don't need a data table, but we do need a table adapter. Whenever we talk to the database, we need a table adapter. So we're going to create one of those var TAs equals a new DS ordered table adapters. Whenever you're defining a TA, use table adapters. Parentheses, done. No. Dot. Which table adapter do you want? This one. The only time you use the query is when you fill in the grid. Now you might have 3 or 4 table adapters that relate to orders. Then you got to pick the right one. Which one has the query in it that you want? I just added my update query to that table adapter. What else? Next, we'll issue the command to save the changes. TA, what's the name of the query? Update order. And now the fun starts. Because remember, whenever we say update order, we have to send it all that stuff in just the right order. Thank God for Intellisense. Okay, thank Bill Gates. Close enough. Here underneath it's telling me, okay, see this, what's bold? Order date. It's telling me I want the order date first. And when I give it the order date, where's my order date? It's in my business class. The order date. The property. Property or member? Property. We're not validating. We just want to get it. And remember the rules from my mentor. Use the property. If it's more efficient to use the member, the compiler will figure that out for us, and it'll convert that and go get the member instead. Doesn't matter. Properties. So I need the order date. And now I hit a comma. And notice the boldface is slid over. So, okay, now I need the customer first name. Property. Then the last name is bold. And you just keep going. Oops. Comma. The size, comma, pepperoni. Notice I'm not typing much. I'll type a little bit. As soon as I get the right one, you start with a capital letter, that helps. Sausage, and as I type down below, the boldface just keeps moving over. Mushrooms, onions, green peppers, number of pies, soda, cheese sticks, coupon, and notice the last one is the order ID. Why is the order ID last? Because in that big query we built, it was all this stuff, and then the where clause were the order ID. The where clause came last, so we have to put the order ID in here. I don't have an order ID property. I commented it out. Well, this may be the reason you want to put it back in again. Remember that I showed you before that we had commented out that read-only property? Or I can just say, we'll get the order ID member. Because there is no property, just give me the internal available only to the class member for order ID. And now it's happy. You just follow the Intellisense. Wow. Thank you. Why am I not getting a syntax error? It's a string. As long as they're the same type, now what's going to happen? I'm going to get a pizza order for Volker, last name Volker. Whoops. So just because you're following the Intellisense doesn't mean you're intelligent. Good thing I got you all watching me here. Anybody else messed up? Sausage, mushroom, onion, green peppers, numpie, soda, cheese sticks, coupon. That looks good. If you feel better using properties for all of these, then put the property back for order ID. I think this is the only place I'm going to be using the order ID property. So now I've gotten rid of it, I can use the member. Go ahead.
How come mine says method must have a return type?
Must have a what?
Return type.
Did you put a void up here?
The space between the foot.
If you put void there, then your method does not even need to have a return statement. When it gets to the end curly bracket, it basically says, I'm done. You can still put a return, but don't try to return something. Just put a return semicolon if you wish. What I hear is the C# programmers don't do that. If it's a void method, you don't return. It's just the method ends, which function. It's like getting hung up on. There's not even a message saying I'm done. It's, hey, Trevor, do your job. And then I wait until I hear the click. It's kind of rude. He's not going to get a raise that way, but I know he did his job and I can carry on. If you put a return statement in there, it's kind of saying, I'm done, click. Better make sure I'm not lying. I don't usually do this, but that's acceptable. It would return anyways. Got no place else to go. Here's the end curly bracket. Are we done? Can't be that simple. It's a start. It's not quite that simple because of one problem. Remember our friends, the ugly nulls? We haven't dealt with those yet. But at this point, I could probably dink around, at least try to save a record that doesn't have any empty parts in it. Like this first one. These are the ones that could be null, right? They're not. So I should be able to say, okay, Eve, it's a large pizza, and let's fill it up. And I'm really hungry, make it 2. And give me another 10 cheese sticks. Save. First of all, I just hit save, and I got nothing back, right? I did kind of get an order total here, but I got nothing back saying, it worked, it's cool. I hate that in programs. You hit save. Microsoft Word is good for that. You hit save, nothing happens. Some programs, the icon on the toolbar changes colors. If you don't need to save, it's gray. If you do need to save, it's blue. If you save, it goes from blue to gray. I want some kind of feedback. So we're going to have to add that. But feedback to the user, guess what? That's a GUI problem, isn't it? So the GUI is going to say, must have worked. I got no complaints from the business class, must have worked. How do we know if it worked? Well, they're all still here. Oh, that's not good enough. Let's switch to Ryan. And now let's go back. Doesn't look like it worked, does it? Why didn't it work? Pardon me?
It's not form code or form code you didn't use put in the business class.
I never called it. Very good. Okay. I created my business class. It's brand new. Who said save? Nobody yet. So here's my button save. All right, there it is. What does it do? It says if there's no errors, then display the total, but shouldn't I save here somewhere? So here's the no errors. If there's any errors on the form, if there are any error markers, that's what that says. If there's any error markers on the form, I'm not saving this. You got errors. My program's going, not doing it. If there's no errors on the form, that still doesn't mean there aren't errors in the business class because the user may have skipped something that's important. So we try to calculate the order total. If the order total succeeds, then we can save. But now, what if there's no order total to display? What if it's DVD? You're not doing any calculations in the DVD program. Well, what that means is that before we save, we probably ought to check to make sure there's no errors. In my save in the business class, hey, business class, check to make sure. We know how to do that. So now we got 2 things to do. And then finally, we should call that method. Oops. Where's the method? I can't find it. It's in the pizza order. Each order saves itself. Imagine if for some reason I had 20 orders in my program's memory at any given time. When I hit save, it's one of them that I'm not saving, not all of them. I'm not saving all, I'm saving one. So I have to say, hey, you, Mr. An order, save. There we go. That saves it. This was just a test of my 2-string. I'm going to get that out of the way so it doesn't confuse me. So on the GUI says, get any errors on the form? No. Then try to display and then save. And this is also where my message box goes to say I'm successful. I saved it because if I came back from here with no exceptions, must have worked. So the GUI communicates to the user, message box dot show. Your changes have been saved. Nice title. OK button. And an icon. This is not an error, so be careful. I use information for this one. Standard message box stuff. So I think my GUI is good now. And if I test this, I believe it'll work this time. And it'll even tell me, I saved it. Save. Save is going to say save record. Save record is going to take all that stuff, throw it in the database. It's going to hang up on me. Because in the meantime, right here, save record, he's waiting, waiting, waiting. Trevor hangs up and goes, well, I guess he's done, so display our message. There's my title, information icon, changes have been saved. So now we test it. Let's go to Ryan Braun, come back, and it worked. I'm shocked. Well, not exactly, but good, it worked. However, kind of hard to screw up here, right? Because if I wipe this out and then hit save, that's a change of focus, and I get my error marker. And my GUI says, you can't leave, you got an error marker. Since my form is already all filled out, it's impossible to make an error here that is a business class error. What's a business class error? Missing required fields. That's impossible right now. I can't test this, what I'm going to do next. It's impossible for me to leave one of these blank and click on the save button, because as soon as I click on save, it's blank, it's required, I get yelled at. And then this if statement fails immediately. We're going to plan ahead, I think. Just check my notes. Guess not, doesn't say anything. But just make, let's check my logic here. Canceling, no. Oh, see if any bad fields, it is there. Makes sense, right? I shouldn't save if there's bad fields in the business class. Maybe the GUI is okay, but the business class is not. This is more for inserting new records. When we insert a record, we could type the first name and then click on save, never touch the last name field, and not get an error marker. The business class will tell me, hey, I need a last name. But right now, because all that data is already filled in, it's impossible to test this. We'll have to wait until unit 4. But let's put the logic in right away. So I'm going to the business class. And I'm going to go over to my calc method. Where's that? Custom method, because I'm going to steal some code here. Here's my order total. And it says, see if there's any bad fields. I want that exact same logic. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to come down here into my save record. And before I try to save anything, even before I create my table adapter, I'm going to say, let's see if there's any bad fields. If the bad fields is empty, then okay, go ahead and save. Else, again, going up here, I'm going to steal the error message. The exact same logic. Don't calculate unless everything's cool. Definitely don't save unless everything's cool. Make sense? Brain's getting tired. We're almost done. Check for bad fields. If the bad fields is the empty string, there are no bad fields, then go ahead and save the data. Otherwise, throw an exception saying correct the errors from bad fields, just like you did when you calculate. It's the same stuff. I have to copy it because I have one function that does the calculations and I have another function that does saving method. I can't test this right now. But we will test it when we start creating new records to make sure that everything's there before we try to save it. All the required stuff is there. Let's take 10. When we come back, I'm going to talk maybe another 10 minutes, 15. And that'll leave you a half hour or so for lab if you wish, or to go home and rest your brains.